Meet Reed Lance Rosenthal, rancher, #1 best-selling award-winning author, and unabashedly, unapologetically on the right side of the outstanding issues of our generation. But don't try to fence him in. Sometimes his positions will surprise you, because Reed is definitely his own man, with his own opinions. You might love him, you might hate him, but you won't be able to stop listening. Step over to the right side with Reed.
Howdy, you listeners and viewers. This is Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side Radio and the Cowboys Take on video channels everywhere. YouTube, Brighteon, Gab, Truth, Social, blah, 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 X, the whole 9 yards. And if you follow me, thank you very much. I appreciate my audience. And you folks out there in radio land who listen in, thank you. And you folks who listen to the audio, so you don't have to look at my ugly maw, on the rightsideradio.com. Thank you. Appreciate it. Hit that subscribe. Hit that little bell notification so you know when these shows come out, because they're a little sporadic right now. In fact, this is very late Sunday night, June 29th, and I am 3 days late getting this out. It is hay season on the ranch, and we're actually going to have some pictures for you, I hope, that the producers, who are technically proficient, unlike myself, will be putting up on the board here and there. We're in the middle of hay season. We have 13 fields down, 10 have been baled. We are actually ahead of last year, which is a minor miracle given the dry conditions out here. Never mind the spring rains, because that doesn't do what a snowpack does for you. And we're even on 2 fields, and we're behind one single bale, one on 1 field. So all in all, I'm happy. I'm pleasantly surprised, and we are going Jesse's. And this is a mountain ranch, so the fields are not huge. They're irregular. The shape of them, the perimeter of them is irregular. There's rocks, there's outcroppings, there's trees, there's hills, there's dales, there's all sorts of things. This is not like cutting a big old square piece of hay field down there in the flats. And we have to go out and stake these fields for the swather so it doesn't hit rocks, it doesn't get too far out of line, get tangled up in trees or wet bog areas. I mean, it's kind of a process. And many times we have to lead the swather on its initial cut around the perimeter of the field, which is the most dangerous, usually, area of the field. And then once he's going on that with the rest of our staking, because we also use yellow stakes to mark any obstacles or obstructions like rocks or, a buried fence post or an old tree stump or whatever in the middle of the hayfield. And we use orange stakes around the perimeter. So orange is perimeter, yellow is caution, obstacle, something that can eat your machine. And when you have your machine eaten, you have a very unhappy swather operator, a very unhappy ranch owner, and you have a big delay because you have to run all the way to town for parts that are usually not there, and you have to order, and usually come in late, and so on and so forth. In the meantime, you're dodging weather, because one of the things you want to try not to do is to get rain on hay that's been cut. Now, just a little rain doesn't really hurt it. In fact, it doesn't even make a dent. But if you get some downpours and that grass stays wet for a while and you have to turn it over several times to dry, that can affect the quality and that can affect the value. So there's a whole bunch of things that go into this. And obviously, before you get all this going, all that hard work you did on gearing up the irrigation, in our case, around March 10th, almost a month and a half early this year, and boy, am I glad we did. I think it's one of the reasons our hay crop is way better than I thought, and it's going to be better than last year's, actually. But, setting up dams when it's 20 degrees and snowing with water freezing as it comes out of the set is, it's an experience that you might want to try to avoid. That's all I can tell you. So the moral of this ranch story is, number one, during hay season, your erstwhile host will be later than normal on his shows. Number one. And number two, sometimes you can anticipate something that's not so great, like we really thought we'd be half of our normal hay crop this year. And here we are, probably going to set a record, which is pretty cool. So the moral of this story is, it ain't over till the fat lady sings. In this case, it ain't over until the swather rolls and the baler bails. Okay, so this show today is going to be pretty brief. I'm not going to give you a history lesson, although that's coming in 2 weeks, because this will tie into what I'm going to talk about in the show, and this is over there in the Mideast. I don't think a lot of people know the history of Israel and the history of Israel's conflict with its Arab neighbors, and the historical conflict between Judaism and shall we say, the following of Muhammad. But I think it will give you perspective, and I think it will certainly give you foundation for what I'm going to share with you, unfortunately, tonight. I'm also going to give you a bunch of rat-a-tat-tats, and I'm going to give you what the Supreme Court has been doing. They have been busy little justices up there, busier than a beaver building a dam on a little creek in the spring. And most of the rulings have been really good, and there was a pile of them in the last 4 or 5 days. So I'll bring you up to speed on that. My real estate show, where I was going to bring you up to speed on real estate markets, I've postponed it. And the reason I postponed it is because there's lots more data coming in, and I don't want to do a partial show. I want to kind of acquaint you with what's going on here in the real estate markets around the West and around the United States, and by the way, also in Canada and other places throughout the world. This is a world type thing, although the United States is kind of in its own little bubble, shall we say. And that's coming in 2 weeks. And this week, this upcoming week, July 4th, I will have a show prior to or on July 4th, either July 3rd or July 4th, and it will be our annual traditions. We've gone over this for 13 years now, and I bring you different permutations and different looks at it, but I want to acquaint you with the founders, the 56 brave men who signed the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776. And I want to acquaint you a little bit with that document and some of its key passages. So that's what we're going to do on July 4th. I think you'll really enjoy it. It's a stunning story of these men who risked their lives, their honor, and their sacred trust with each other and with their newly formed country, knowing that their signature on that document was really a death warrant with our buddy King George across the sea. So anyway, that will be to you on July 3rd or July 4th, which is now just a few days away. Unbelievable. The year is half over. It's just, wow, unbelievable. And the news continues at a torrent. By the way, the show after that will be the Israeli-Arab-Israel history show, which I think you'll find really fascinating. And it'll put a lot of things in context for you. And as we're going to discuss in this show, when you have thousands of years of enmity and a decade of actual kinetic strife, along with atrocities, and I would say kind of on both sides, although more on the Arab side than the Israeli side, but neither has clean hands, you'll see why this ebullient feelings that the press is throwing out, unless you're CNN, and this all is okay kind of story that we're getting from various governments, I think it's fairy tale, and it's going to affect us. But that's later in this show. In fact, in just a few minutes when I get done with the rat-a-tat-tat. I'm going to save my founder's quote for the July 4th. I'm going to have several of them for you, and boy, they are doozers. You will really like them. They will strike a chord. All right, let's start with some economic rat-a-tat-tat, because while everybody is jumping on the stock bandwagon and the NASDAQ is reaching all-time highs, and the S&P is just about at all-time highs. The Russell Index, which is 2,000 companies. Remember, the NASDAQ 100 is just 100, and the S&P 500 is just 500. And the Russell Index is smaller companies. I mean, the heartbeat of the American economy. Sure, Google plays a big role, and Alphabet and Meta and all those guys, NVIDIA, all the darlings of the tech world. But it is the smaller companies and the mid-sized companies that makes this country run and that provides most of the employment. And the Russell 2000 is struggling to rise at all, and it's nowhere near its all-time highs. I should tell you a little something. Student loans. Okay, we talked about this a month or two ago. The situation has not gotten better. In fact, student loans and the students who owe those loans to the government have increased from a 90-day delinquency, that is 2 million people, 90 days delinquent back in February, to now, in June, 6 million borrowers delinquent by 90 days. Now, student loans are kind of a special beast. Okay, it's one of the few things, along with the IRS, that can garnish your wages. It's an immediate and dreadful impact to your credit report and has all sorts of other drastic ramifications. So what's happening is that these students who are now delinquent on these loans are panicking. And they're throwing every resource they can at the loans, and good for them. But that means they don't have resources to spend on lots of other things. I want you to think down the road a few months and think about what 6 million people who are focused on one expenditure, that student loan, and not making any other expenditures, no furniture, no cars, no TVs, no entertainment, no restaurants, what that's going to do to the economy. You can couple that with what else is going on in the economy too. All right, so by the way, that credit on a student loan is not dischargeable in bankruptcy. So that's another nasty little item that these students and these borrowers have to contend with. FedEx, right? You know that name. You know that company. Big company, one of the largest in the world, if not the largest, might be slightly larger than UPS in terms of package delivery and shipping, etc. FedEx, their earnings were okay. They were not as good as in the past, and they're on a downward decline. But what's really interesting about FedEx is that they've been starting to lay off people, and they gave no forward guidance. Forward guidance is when a company, the executives of a company, send out to the markets, to stockbrokers and wherever, forward guidance. And that forward guidance is what they expect to happen for the rest of the year or a 12-month period. Profits are going to rise, we're going to have new contracts, whatever rah they want to do. And it's usually on the rah side, not on the bad side. FedEx declined to give forward guidance for more than 1 quarter in advance. That, folks, says more than bad forward guidance. So think about that. And FedEx is a really good canary in the coal mine as to the economy. If people aren't buying stuff, packages aren't being shipped. If people don't have money, they're not spending the extra $20 to get something there overnight. Think about it. Personal income. There was a bunch of data that came out last week, and it was glossed over by the mainstream media. Nobody talked about it, but it's indicative. First of all, personal spending, and this kind of ties into that student loan thing and related things that are going on in the economy. Personal spending was forecast to rise by 0.1%. It fell by 0.1%. Now, it doesn't sound like a lot, but that's 0.2% in a 27, some say 32, $32 trillion economy. Do that math. It's a big number. And it's also kind of walking into a declining slope of personal expenditures, which has been apparent for the last 3 or 4 months. Personal income, also kind of a key component to the economy. I mean, if you don't have the income, you can't spend the income. If you can't spend the income, you're not contributing to gross domestic product, are you? Personal income was supposed to be up 0.3%. It was down 0.4%. Folks, that's a 0.7%, right? I mean, almost a full 1% decrease in personal income. That means people are working less hours. People can't find jobs. They're not getting that second job or third job that they were finding before. And that means they have less money, and that means they spend less. And all that goes into the economic equation also. And the big, beautiful bill, Trump's big, beautiful bill, has now passed the Senate, just happened a day or so ago. Whether or not the House will accept what the Senate passed is unknown. I don't think the big, beautiful bill is going to be signed by July 4th, which is what Trump wanted. And to be honest with you, I've looked at certain aspects of it, and I'm going to do a show on it because it's very important you understand what's being passed up there. This is a monstrous bill, monstrous. There's some really good things in it, and there's some really scary things in it, particularly given our current state of indebtedness here in this country. $111,000 per person, not family, per person. You got a family of 4, you owe $440,000. That's your share, folks, of the $37 trillion national debt. So better plan some of your income going in that direction at some point in the future because they will find a way. Anyway, the big, beautiful bill I'm going to bring to you when it's passed, because right now there's no sense bringing it to you and getting you all stirred up until it is passed, because sure as hell, provisions that I pick out will either be revised or the bill will go back to joint committee between the House and the Senate to try and work out the differences. And I don't want to, I have a habit, and that is trying not to get ahead of myself when information is evolving. Okay, let's talk about the court system. There's been some really good rulings here in the last week. Number one, a federal appeals court said it's okay for Trump to disband the government's, I'm not making this up, Institute for Peace. That's right, the Institute for Peace. Trump tried to fire the head honchos and disband the agency, and they sued, and you know, the usual district court judge somewhere in Washington, California, New York, wherever, shut it down. Well, no more. The Institute for Peace is going bye-bye, and it couldn't happen to a nicer bunch of progressives, and it couldn't happen soon enough. Nationwide injunctions. You know, I've been jumping up and down about this. You've heard lots about it. The Supreme Court ruled that a district court judge cannot issue a nationwide injunction. And there were certain parameters, et cetera. I'm not going to get into the details with you. All these articles, by the way, and always with my shows, the articles that back up the information I'm bringing you so you can read it in detail, which I don't have the time to go into, obviously, unless you're going to, like, curl up in a sleeping bag and go to sleep while you're listening to me. They're always on the website, on the rightsideradio.com. In this case, they'll be under Constitution and rat-a-tat-tat, and in a few cases, family safety. They're fascinating cases, all the ones I'm bringing to you, and they're huge. These are huge cases. And both of those were huge wins. The nationwide injunction thing was huge. There's been 130 injunctions issued by these left-wing judges playing politics with their black robes, and that's pretty much over. The best they can do, except under really extreme conditions, the best they can do is now issue an injunction as to their district. So if you're a federal judge in District X, you know, the state of Arizona, your injunction is good for the state of Arizona. In some cases, it's good for the appeals district, the 1st through the 11th appeals courts. But it is no longer nationwide, this travesty, this lawfare, and this misuse and miscarriage of justice that has hampered this administration to the really extreme detriment of Americans and America. It's in some ways is almost treasonous. It really is. And the folks who are bringing these lawsuits, well, that's their intent, obviously. Hinder, delay, and stall. That is their intent. Next one, Maryland. Okay, the Supreme Court ruled that Maryland parents can yank their kids from any LGBTQ class and can decide not to allow their kids to read any textbooks having to do with LGBTQ. That's huge. This is nationwide now. I mean, remember, this is the Supreme Court. This isn't some district judge, doing whatever he's doing up there in Seattle. So that's a really big win for parents, and a really big win, I think, for education overall. It starts getting that whole woke indoctrination thing out of the schools, which is we're making really good progress on, albeit like 30 years late. Yeah. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court upheld, this is one of the only poor rulings the last week, Obamacare, certain provisions of Obamacare, which had to do with the payment for preventative medicines, and it's very complicated. It has Medicaid involved, etc. Rather than go into it, what they did was to reinforce the existence of Obamacare. And Obamacare is an abomination, as is the architect of Obamacare and the guy who hired the architect, Mr. Barry Obama. Universal service. So, those fees that are on your phone records, your phone bills that you get every week? Hopefully you don't get them every week. Every month, it says universal fee. Take a look at the next phone bill, and it adds up. I mean, it's kind of expensive. Those fees are collected ostensibly, who knows where the money really goes, to widen communications access, internet, broadband, all sorts of things, phone, to rural areas in the country. So its intent is good. The fact that there's a fee that everybody pays, including those of you in a bigger city or town, to help your fellow rural citizens, well, you can kind of make up your mind on that for yourself. But that universal fee was upheld by the Supreme Court. It's legal, and it will stay on your phone bill, folks. And then we have kids, pornography online. Ken Paxton, who I think is terrific, he's the AG of Texas, and he's running for Senate down there against a rhino, Cornyn, who really needs to go. So I'm all in for Ken Paxton, all in. I mean, this guy has cojones of steel. He's taken on the left in a big way over the last decade, and he's pretty much kicked their butt. He said that pornography online can be restricted so that kids can't see it. And to be honest with you, I don't know what he defined as a kid, under 18, under 15, I don't know. But kids can't see pornography online. Well, the whole woke crowd, under the guise of freedom of speech, rose up in anguished protest. What do you mean a 5-year-old can't go to a pornography site? I mean, what's wrong with you? Anyway, the Supreme Court upheld that. So that is protecting our kids, and I think it will also improve the quality of overall internet service. Big win. For parents, education, kids, the whole 9 yards. Another big win. States can block Medicare money for Planned Parenthood. I don't know if you know this, but Planned Parenthood, which is left of left, okay? I don't care what side of the abortion issue you're on, but Planned Parenthood is just a leftist. It's terrible. Margaret Sanger, remember her name? The original eugenicist. And we'll get into that someday. Because she originally formed the predecessor to Planned Parenthood, to make sure that blacks didn't procreate. Oh, yes. You know, those Democrats that are so worried about their black fellow Americans. Yes. Okay. That's huge. That'll cripple Planned Parenthood. Like any left-wing organization that's been feeding at the government trough, once the money is cut off, they tend to dissipate and wither, which is terrific. And the last one I'm going to bring you is that the Supreme Court upheld a ban that Tennessee placed on gender-affirming care. You know, an 11-year-old is convinced by her woke teacher that she's really a boy and therefore needs surgery and hormones and all that kind of stuff, or a boy is convinced he's really a girl, whatever. Tennessee said, nope, no gender affirming care in this state, and no gender affirming care in the education system in this state. And of course, the woke crowd went nuts because, I mean, it's quite normal to, you know, do behind the parents' back without notifying them hormone injections and surgery on small children, because you've convinced them that they aren't what they, you know, biologically are. So that's a huge win. Another huge win, by the way, for parents as well as America and, shall we say, social morality, the social fabric of the country. What they did not decide yet, but which is coming up, is a few cases on free speech, very important cases, and birthright citizenship, which is huge. Okay, birthright citizenship is about 400,000 babies a year that are born to aliens. They may be here legally when they give birth. They may not be. But the left has played the card of the Constitution, saying that if you're born on American soil, you're automatically an American. And if you're automatically an American, by the way, you can bring in your family. You know, your 100 cousins, sisters, grandfathers, grandparents, parents, siblings, whatever. And there you go. One birthright citizen becomes 300 aliens. All right. We'll see how they come down on that. Been a lot of 6-3 votes over the last several weeks. Kind of interesting. I mean, there's a sharp demarcation between the, shall we say, more conservative and conservative judges and the liberal judges that were appointed by, of course, Obama. Okay. Iran and Israel. And this is what I'm going to finish up the show with, because I want you to think about this as I lead up to the history of Israel and conflict in the Middle East here week after this, actually. We've been told that there's peace in our time. Rah, 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 rah. You know, we demolished the nuclear bunkers. Iran's program has been set back, 10,000 years. They're now back in the Stone Age. And, half their military brass has been wiped out, and et cetera, et cetera. And the feeble response, as the press likes to call it, of Iran to this attack by the United States and Israel on its facilities, which it consisted of a few missiles lobbed at a base in Qatar with lots of advance warning and, shall we say, antiquated guidance systems. So none of them went anywhere that they could do any damage. Don't believe this, folks. Don't believe this. The Iran deal is not over. It is not over. And if you listen carefully, and I have a bunch of articles on the website, on the rightsideradio.com, if you listen carefully to the videos and the articles that I've posted, or you've been doing your own research and listening to news sources other than the mainstream morons, you will find that the top tier of the Israeli political and military establishment is basically saying it ain't over. And the top tier of the Iranian military, and I don't want to call them political because they're really religious, that whole crew they're basically saying it's not over. And not only is it not over, but we're going to continue nuclear enrichment. And then, of course, we have Trump saying they'll never have a nuclear bomb, and Israel saying the same. Now, given that context, and I'm summarizing right here, and it's an accurate summary of what each side is saying, despite the trumpets blaring and the drums beating and everybody, flocking to the S&P because peace in our time. Don't believe it. There's going to be another deal over there. And it's going to be perhaps more severe than the bombing of the Iranian nuclear facilities. And while we're at that, there's no way, some of those facilities are 800 meters. That's 800 meters. That's almost half a mile. 800 meters underground. Now, they may know what happened in the direct area of the impact, even if it's true, as they say, that they were able to guide these 30,000-pound behemoth conventional weapons down a 10 by 10 ventilator shaft. Assuming that's true, they have no idea how the miles of installation underneath that, 800 meters down, they have no way of knowing. They know they sealed the entrances, but, last time I checked, Iran has bulldozers and a bunch of industrious people. And with Iran, there's 400 kilograms. That's 1,000 grams. 400 kilograms of enriched uranium, good enough for a bomb, missing. It was spirited out of the site. Whether they had advance warning or Russia tipped them off through its intelligence services, we don't know. Russia may be safekeeping it for them, or maybe somewhere else at a facility we don't even know about in Iran. But here's the bottom line. As you'll see when I bring you this history, thousands of years of enmity, 100 years of bitter, bloody battle, two diametrically opposed religious beliefs, two diametrically opposed world beliefs, one backed by the BRICS nations, the other backed kind of by the West. And think about the difference between the BRICS nations, China and Russia, and the West, the United States and its so-called allies. When you throw all those ingredients into your recipe for peace, your cake's going to turn out badly. So keep your ears to the track on this. And by the way, I hope I'm wrong. I hope there is peace over there, even if it's an uneasy peace. But I don't think there will be. And that's going to have ramifications on the markets, on the economy, and on the planet. More on that when I bring you that the 7 or 8 days from now. In the meantime, I hope you're gearing up for a great 4th of July. I can't wait to bring you. It's really one of my favorite shows that I've ever done, and I do permutations of it every year. But wait till you hear about the men who created the country that you live in, and the document that I think they had to have guidance on it, really. And the document that they created, which was the precursor and the foundation of the Constitution under which we live. Hope things are going great for you. You keep the wind at your back. We'll talk to you in just a few days before the 4th, and have a terrific week. This is Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side Radio and the Cowboys Take.
Please remember, if you've missed any shows, just click on Show Archive and you'll find all of his shows. We look forward to seeing you here again next week for another episode of Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side.